thank you again for being with us today. We're walking through a short sermon series in Advent about hope and different dynamics and dimensions of hope. We looked through a couple of things the past few weeks, in particular the need and necessity that we have for hope in our lives. How it's very difficult and maybe impossible to live in the world that we live in the time that we live in, without hope. Hope is necessary. It's enlivening. It's a fire and a flame that keeps good things alive and lives and burning in our lives. But we also looked last week at the reality that we live in a world that seems to be bereft of hope. We live in a very hopeless world, in a hopeless place, in a hopeless time, where even though we have this great need for hope, hope seems in short supply and it's very difficult to find. And when we're in that place, we're in a world where hope seems far away, hope seems distant, hope seems like it's hard to let hold of. We can come to a place where we find it difficult to remain hopeful and keep hoping when all our hopes seem constantly disappointed. Right? Because it's not just that we live in a hopeless world, it's that we've had hopes in our lives before. Things that we wanted, things that we thought were good expectations that we were hoping for in our lives, and then they don't come to pass or are delayed, and that experience makes it hard to hold on to hope over time. And so we can come to this place when we come to a relationship with the idea of hope, the experience of hope, and we sort of say, why should I hope, or why should I keep hoping when I've tried to have endurance and hope before, and yet my hopes haven't come to pass, they haven't come to be fulfilled. And so one of the most pressing questions that we can ask in relationship to hope and the things that we hope for is, when will my hopes be fulfilled? If hope is an important thing for living life, and we live in a world that is hopeless, and so it makes it difficult to hope when we see things not fulfilled. It's very natural for us to have the question in our lives, when will if I'm going to keep hoping, if I'm going to hope again, if I'm going to hope another day, another week, another year, if I'm going to live a life that's rooted in hope, and not just totally give in to bitterness, cynicism, and despair, it's reasonable to ask the question every once in a while, when will my hopes be fulfilled? What does it look like for us to ask this question about the fulfillment of our hopes in our lives? This is the question that we're going to be asking today. We're going to be today in Paul's letter to the Romans. This is in the New Testament. We're going to be in Romans chapter 8, verses 18 to 25. I would encourage you to, if you have a Bible, to turn it open to that text. You can pull it up on a device, whatever you like. The Bibles out at the front that are yours to keep and take, whatever you'd like to just get a Bible in your hands. Just become familiar with the text and to learn a comfortability in ourselves to be able to read the Bible and hear God speak to us. So again, we're going to be in Romans chapter 8, verses 18 to 25. I will read the text aloud and encourage you to follow along. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay, and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Hope is only hope if we are hoping for something that we don't have yet. Hope is only hope. Hope only exists as hope if it is set on something that we don't yet have. This is what Paul says in Romans 8, verse 24. For in this hope we are saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what they see? The idea of hope is necessarily related to what we don't yet have. And so there's this weird, interesting dynamic at play when we're hoping for something, or at least are in relationship with something that we want, and describe that relationship as hope, that when we get it, the strange thing happens where we find that we've laid hold of something that we've wanted for some time, and yet there can at times be an emptiness that comes at the same time time of laying hold of that thing. And it's the emptiness that comes from the actually death of hope in our lives that has come when we lay hold of that thing. Right? Something can happen when we want something that's far off, or we have a wish for something, or a desire for something, and we actually get there and we get to it and we go, I'm glad I actually got this thing, but I feel like I sort of lost something along the way. And the thing that's lost when we lay hold of it was actually the experience of hoping for that thing in the first place. And hope in itself, the experience of hope, is a good thing. It's a life-giving thing, it's an encouraging thing, it's a piece of strength. And so something can actually happen in our lives when a wish is fulfilled or a desire is fulfilled, that we get it and we lay hold of it and we feel like, wow, that's wonderful, that's great, that's satisfying, that's filling something up in myself. And yet at the same time, my relationship with hope becomes more broken. And I've lost an arena in my life where hope was actually filling up something good and meaningful. Achieving some long sought-after thing can bring a satisfaction, but also the sense of emptiness where we go, gosh, I didn't realize that there was actually something in the longing for that thing that was meaningful to me. There was something in the struggle for that thing that was itself providing meaning and challenge in my life. And once those things are removed, I sort of go, well, I've got this thing now. But I actually lost something along the way to getting it. That was providing something for me. Something meaningful. Something generative. Something that I was passionate about. In that place, the reality of hope can be lost. Because our just experience of hope on its own takes up space in our lives. It actually takes up quite a lot of meaningful space. So much about who I am right now is related to the things that I'm hoping for. And when we lose that, we need to put something back in there. We need to renegotiate that in ourselves. And so actually, the idea of hope being fulfilled, right? Hope can't be fulfilled if in the getting what we want, we're not hoping anymore. Hope's not fulfilled in the elimination of hope. Right? Maybe a desire is fulfilled, a wish is fulfilled, but how can a hope be fulfilled if in the getting what we want, our relationship with hope ends? That's actually not a fulfillment of hope in the first place. It's not fulfillment of hope if it eliminates hope at all. Hope exists in the place in relationship to which it's something that we want that we don't have, that we're longing for that we don't have. So as long as hope endures, it's necessarily unfulfilled. At the same time, right, so if hope is not necessarily fulfilled in the getting what we want all the time, at the same time, it's at least pastorally insensitive, if not just not living in the reality of the world, to think that what we need is just to hope for things over and over again and to not get them. As though somehow that keeps hope alive in our life because we're not getting what we want. Right? There's a part of hope on the other side. This is about the endurance of hope. Hope helps us to endure the pursuit of things, but we also at some point need to come into some signs in relationships in our lives that the things that we're hoping for are coming to pass. That the desires that we have are being fulfilled. That things that we're wishing for do come true. Our hope, in some ways then, is also only able to come to pass as we endure in longing for something and see it fulfilled. Hope is the power, then, also in that place, to be able to endure in longing for something that we really want or need or feel a deep desire for. And in this, hope produces patience. Hope is the power to in itself keep hoping for that thing that we're longing for. Hope produces patience. And without patience, not only can we not see things that we want come to pass in our lives, but we arguably cannot even survive the nature of this time as it is currently structured without patience. We need patience to endure the suffering of this time. Paul says in Romans 8:25, but if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. This can also be translated endurance. We wait for it with endurance, but I think the language of patience here is helpful. Patience is endurance, right? Patience and endurance in that sense are sort of coterminous terms. But patience is endurance with a certain character attached to it. Patience is endurance with a gracious character. Patience is graceful endurance. Someone can endure, right, and really muscle out their And you watch them do that, and you're like, you are really working hard at that endurance, right? And I mean, God help us when we're in that place. Because sometimes we want to endure something, and we feel like muscling it out is all we have. But when you watch someone graciously endure, you go, you have the gift of patience. You have the fruit of the Spirit of patience actively in your life. That's God's work in your life. Gracious endurance over time, that is patience. And Paul says, we live in a time that's governed by a certain sort of suffering, such that without patience you will probably be unable to endure it. And it's the sort of suffering that comes not necessarily from pain, not from other people harming you. It's the sort of suffering that comes from the experience of futility. Futility meaning fruitlessness. Paul says we live in a time that is cursed by futility, where people sow things and do not reap the things that they've sowed. And that kind of suffering is deeply painful. And if you do not have patience to graciously endure that cruel part of this time, you're in big trouble. Paul says that this time now is a time of suffering in Romans 8, verse 18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time, the word for time here is kairos. It's not a chronological time. There's different words. Chronos, the Greek word chronos, chronological, to be used to talk about time as in like the passing of seconds or minutes. When Paul uses the word kairos here to talk about time, he's talking about a moment, an age, a zeitgeist, a spiritually significant set of time. Paul says, in this time, in this moment, in this age, it is an age of suffering. And he goes on to talk about the kind of suffering that it is in verses 20 and 22. He says, for the creation was subjected in its own suffering to futility. Futility. And it's the kind of futility, right? Futility, think about fruitfulness generally. That futility of fruitfulness can be described in this idea of the groaning of wanting to bring something to birth. Verse 22, and we know that the whole of creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And that idea of wanting to bring something to birth. God help us, maybe a child. Maybe a dream or a desire that you have, where you're like, this creative endeavor is a child to me that hasn't been born. Maybe a relationship that you wanted, something that you sow into and say, God, bring this to birth. We live in a time where those efforts are cursed by fruitlessness and futility, like God said to Adam, right, in Genesis chapter 3. One of the elements of the curse of falling away. He says, Adam, you're going to sow into the ground, and the ground is going to produce thistles and thorns for you. Futility in the things that we sow in our lives. And without patience, without the ability to endure when we're faced with the curse of futility. To keep going when we're faced with the curse of futility, but not just keep going, but the curse of futility is so heavy that if we approach it with a muscling out character, it will snap us at some point. Some joint, some muscle in ourselves will snap under the burden of the futility in this time. So we don't just need endurance, we need patience. We need gracious endurance, pliable endurance, flexible endurance that is able to say, God, I'm receiving your grace in some way such that even when I want to snap in this thing, you are helping me be pliable and flexible and remain in endurance in this way. Not in my own strength, but in yours. And we need patient endurance. Hope gives us this patient endurance. Hope helps us have that. We can have this in the suffering we experience both together, but also as an individual. Verse 22, it has the togetherness of futility in mind. It talks about the whole of creation, but Paul says in verse 23, not only creation, but we ourselves, by the virtue of the Spirit, groan inwardly. We experience inward futility ourselves. Futility like emotionally, psychologically, like in our self-understanding. Like, why am I not becoming and bearing the fruit of who I thought I would be when I imagined what my life would be like? That can be an individual experience, a personal experience that we have. You know, all of these things without patience and without hope that fuels patient, gracious endurance over time, the suffering that comes from the futility of this world is too heavy. We will snap under its pressure. So with respect to hope, then, we have these two elements. when we think about what it means for hope to be fulfilled, or for hope itself to be fruitful. On the one hand, sometimes we're living in relationship to something that we think is hope, but really it's wish fulfillment, or a desire that we have. And when that thing comes to pass, we let hold of that thing, we get it, yet it robs us of the place of hope in our life in the first place. And so sometimes hope is not fulfilled by getting the things that we want if it eliminates the power of hope in our lives. I hope for that thing, I got it, now I'm not hoping anymore. Great. And now hope is gone. But on the other hand, though hope is powerful to put us into a place in relationship to the things that we want, where we long for things with faithful endurance over time, it also is reasonable to say, so is the only thing that I should be longing for in my life is just hope helps me to endure and endure and endure and endure. I should have no expectation ever that the things that I'm longing for ever come to pass. Neither of those seem satisfying when it comes to thinking about what it means for hope to be fulfilled. For hope to remain, and the power of hope to remain in our lives, and at the same time see things come to pass in our lives where we do see things in our lives bear fruit. But it's fruit that does not eliminate hope, or remove hope, or end hope. It's fruit that continues hope in our lives. And I think I just said fruit. Because hope is a very strong piece of it. Fruit is hope. Fruit. Paul says that hope is a longing for things that we don't see. And the reality is that when we're hoping for things that we desire, we actually see them really clearly, don't we? I want that thing. I want that person. I want that job. I want that feeling. We actually see those very clearly, which is why we want them so badly. But Paul says hope is a longing for things that we don't see. That we don't see at all. Things that somehow hope in us knows we long for, though we could not create a picture of them if we tried. But then the longing for those things becomes the experience of hope in us, and we apply them to things that we do see, things that we desire, things that we want. But those are actually desires and wants, they're not hope, because hope is that experience of longing for something that I know that I want, but I actually cannot even create a picture of it myself in this moment. A longing for something that we do not see. And those things that we do not see but we long for are not described by the category of desire. They're not described by the category of want. They're described by the category of revealing. Revelation. Hope corresponds to revelation. Something that we somehow know that we long for, but that we truly do not see. We truly are not aware of. Until, bam! Glory. It's right in front of us. That's what hope corresponds to. Hope needs revelation to be fulfilled. Because when hope encounters revelation, hope encounters something that vindicates hope in the first place. Hope goes, I told you were hoping for something. Here it is, revelation. But revelation does not eliminate hope. It doesn't say, well, I got that, now I'm done. Revelation says, there is so much more to come, so you should keep on hoping. Revelation is the fulfillment of hope. Our experience of hope is longing for the revelation in our lives of things that we are longing for, but that we truly cannot see. True hope, that is longing for these things that we cannot see, but are longing to be revealed to us. Revelation is something that is truly unexpected coming from the outside. To the extent that hope is longing not for wish fulfillment, but for revelation, the experience of hope in our lives is the experience of knowing that there is something better coming in another world. There is something that we're longing for in another world. There is something to hold out hope for that God is bringing in another world. In other words, we hope for certain things, but the existence of hope itself points to something beyond what we want and beyond what we see. It points to something that we truly cannot see. When hope receives revelation, hope doesn't just result in the fulfillment of our desires. It receives more than what it was ultimately hoping for. And in receiving more, it vindicates hope on both sides of this challenge and what it means to remain hoping for. The story that we are welcoming in Advent season, the story of the arrival of God in the form of God's Son, Jesus Christ, the story of God's coming, of his entering into this world in a way that was profoundly unlooked for, is the story that speaks to what we're actually hoping for. And this is what Paul says. When Paul talks about the revelation that hope corresponds to, the things that we are looking for, he says it looks like glory. And what kind of glory does it look like, Paul says? He says in verse 19, for creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. And he says again in 21, the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the freedom of the glory of what? The glory of the children of God. What is the glory of the children of God? It's the glory of the revealing of the truth that you belong to God. That you are God's children. And that is something that we're not looking for. I mean, even now, honestly, isn't it? We're like not looking for it. We're like, I have all these other things that I want and desire in my life. And they're good things that we long for and desire. Things that we want filled up in our lives. Things that we're longing for. Things that we see inside. I know that's a good thing. I want God to give that to me. But even the idea that I belong to God. I have a family in God. I'm home in God. We're honestly not even looking for that. We hear those words and we go, I kind of don't care. That doesn't make any difference to me. But that is where hope comes in and corresponds to the longing of the revealing. That when God entered this world in Jesus Christ, profoundly unlooked for, he entered into human flesh and made you brothers and sisters in the family of God, sons and daughters in the family of God, and revealed something to you that we actually are longing for, the ability to belong as we are in God. And that is what God offers us in the story of Christmas, in the coming of Jesus, the fulfillment of our hopes, the things that we're hoping for, that we get more in return. Because in the coming of Jesus, God creates a way for us to belong in God and belong in God's family. The revealing, the things that our hopes are really longing for, is the idea, especially in the places where we don't feel filled up, where we feel empty, where we feel lack, to say the glorious revelation that is actually already true is that I belong in God now. Right now. I belong in God. I have a family in God. I have hope in God. My questions about belonging, about actualization, those things are answered in my belonging in God. Truly, we're not looking for these things. When we came to God, and when we come to God asking for all the things we want, we never think to ask God, God, just help me know that I belong in you. We never ask God for that, do we? We never come to God and say, God, I want a handful of things, and really at the top of my list is to know that I belong in you. We're never looking for that. And yet it is the thing that our hope is actually corresponding to. The idea that there's something beyond this world that's not a place of futility, that's not a place of dashed dreams and hopes, but it's a place of belonging. And God says, I will give you that right now by sending my son Jesus. This, entering into this, whenever we encounter some area of our life where we say, God, I experience this desire, but I receive from you the fulfillment of my deeper longing to know that I belong in you in Jesus. That looks like hope fulfilled in some area of our lives. And again, when hope is fulfilled in that way, it doesn't negate our desires. It doesn't say, well, I got that thing, or I got this other thing, and now I'm done. Right? When we experience the fulfillment of knowing that we belong in God, even when we have a desire that's unmet, we don't go to God and say, okay, God, you gave me this now, and so I'm going to stop hoping for this thing. What we have instead is a down payment in relationship with God to know that God does want to meet our desires and that we can continue to hope, because hope does not fail, and hope produces patient endurance, and hope is able to see fruit come in a world that is suffering under futility. What are the areas in our lives where we come to God and say, God, I've been longing. I don't know if I have hope for it for another season. What are those areas? What are those longings? When we allow hope to speak to us, the fulfillment of those longings is something you already have if you will let God reveal it to you in Jesus. The belonging in God. When that happens, that does not negate the hope that we have for those other desires. It strengthens our ability to keep hoping for them. It makes us stronger in hope. It works with our desires. Because hope fulfilled overflows into both endurance to keep hoping and an experience of knowing that God wants to fulfill and satisfy our deepest lives. I don't know when or if any of the unmet desires that we have in this life, in this world that is cursed by futility and fruitlessness, will come to pass. I don't know that anyone can say with confidence that we know any of these things about how our lives will turn out. I know that our desires are good. I know that God has put those things that we long for fruitfulness in our lives. Those are good things that God created us to long for, because God created us for a world that is not futile. God created us for a fruitful world, for a fruitful home, of an experience of belonging, and knowing that the things that I long for, desire, and fruitfulness in my life have some fruitful end, have some fruitful expression. And I don't know, as we experience the tension of that longing in this world, what, on this side of the resurrection, all of the longings and desires that we have for this life will come to pass for in our lives. I don't know. But I know that the experience of hope can feel fulfilled and can come to a fulfillment in those places of longing. When we come to God in those places of longing and say to God, I don't know whether if this desire is ever going to come to pass in my life, but I know, God, that the revelation for me to experience in this moment is the revelation of the glory that I belong in you. I belong in you now in the name of Jesus, especially in this place where this is unfulfilled. And my experience in that revelation of belonging in you right now does not negate my desire. It doesn't make me end my desire. It gives me the power and hope to keep hoping now in a futile world for that thing that I long for. That's what we need in this world. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what the story of our lives will look like when we get to the end. But who will have had the power to keep hoping? Who will have had that? People for whom the well of hope in their lives keeps bubbling up, because they have in these areas a fulfilled hope that comes from having received the revelation of your belonging in God, especially in the places where you have unmet wants. And that gives us power to keep hoping for those things. Because those things that we long for in our lives, they're good things. And one of the greatest tragedies in this world is not necessarily that everything that we want in our lives doesn't come to pass. We don't know how that will work out. One of the great tragedies of this world is that this world is so futile and so painful in its fruitlessness and futility that it grinds hope into the ground altogether. When we receive a fulfilled hope from the revelation of Jesus, who came unlooked for, unwelcomed, unasked for, we receive something that fulfills hope in our lives and it becomes a wellspring. To know that God wants to meet our desires and that a day is